Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows. Available everywhere podcasts are.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back yet again to the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you, as always, by the GSMC Sports Network. Thank you all for commenting. We have some fantastic comments in our previous segments. Keep them coming for our next segment. We are switching over very briefly the world of the running back. We've talked about them a little bit in previous shows. But in terms of running back sleepers, I feel like it's a little bit easier than QBs because the running back market is so much more wide open and there's so many more options, especially in later rounds, like we're talking about the QBs, than quarterbacks you're comfortable with taking. But at the end of the day, it's all up to also how your draft goes. Because let's say a lot of people are honed in on either the hero running back position, where you basically take your guy early on and wait, or the zero running back position where you risk it and wait. That really depends on how these sleeper picks will pan out, especially because they're all guys who profile as the second option in their offenses as well. So these are more of high upside guys than, overall starters. I know it's cliche to say when we're comparing the QB and running back market, because all of these QB sleepers could potentially start for you. But that's how deep the running back market is as well. And it certainly feels like it's part of the puzzle of the whole fantasy football draft strategy that people employ. Without further ado, let's talk about some running back sleepers a little bit. Let's start off in Denver, where we have a very intriguing running back room there. Let's start off with Jaleel McLaughlin. I really like this guy. He offers a lot of explosivity, a lot of yards after contact. He actually topped running backs in yards after contact per game last season, second in yards per carry, fourth in big play runs. So as you can see, all of those stats speak to his ability to be explosive in the open field. That being said, the Denver Broncos will talk about this running back room a little bit next week as we go over some teams and skill position players next week that could be of interest in terms of fantasy. This Broncos running back room is the X factor here, because you have Javonte Williams, who has been largely inconsistent ever coming into the league. Coming into his fourth year, I believe, in the league, hasn't topped 1,000 yards, but has been on the precipice. Last year was very close. And you bring in a guy who I've actually seen live again, a Jersey guy in Audric Estime, who scored a lot of touchdowns at Notre Dame, 29, I believe. So this running back room certainly is for the versatile. But at the end of the day, I really like Jaleel McLaughlin as the best fantasy play out of this one because of his ability, A, to be explosive in the open field, and B, I think he's the best receiver out of all these running backs as well. And because of that versatility, he's a sleeper. In terms of, whether he's going to be a starter for you, I don't necessarily think so. But he is a value pickup in, say, the 9th or 10th round if you're in a league where people are more or less inclined to be picking running backs higher and higher up the draft boards. Because if your strategy is more interpreted by waiting, then I think that's where Jaleel McLaughlin can be the high value pick, by being a guy who you get because you waited, not because you panicked and picked him up. And then let's go to the Arizona running back room. We talked about this a little bit because a lot of people in the comments have been talking about James Conner as a really interesting piece in terms of running backs as well. As Shep Easy's Sweet Spot says, don't sleep on Jerome Ford, especially with Chubb uncertainty. I absolutely agree with that sentiment, Shep Easy's Sweet Spot. I love Jerome Ford. I love this guy in the open field. Seeing him last year, my only concern with him is that in the profile of the Browns offense, you kind of do need the Nick Chubb kind of physicality to open it up. And he doesn't necessarily profile as the most physical of running backs, but I do like him in terms of explosivity, much like I like Jaleel McLaughlin. So that's a fantastic comment. I'm not sleeping on him. I think that he should go in drafts. I think he can go as high as potentially the 8th round and as low as either undrafted or the 12th round. But he could also be an interesting stream option for many of you fantasy managers out there. So that's a fantastic point. I love Jerome Ford, but it's all going to be about how he plays in the Cleveland Browns offensive scheme. But let's go back to the list here that I have. The Arizona running back situation as well is also something that I'm going to be monitoring because James Conner, a lot of people say, plays better when Kyler Murray is healthy. But Trey Benson is going to be interesting. I believe he was their 5th round pickup this year, capable backup to Conner. What I like about him is that he also kind of fits that profile of a physical running back in terms of, whereas some backups bring that explosivity that a Joey McLaughlin could, he's one of the more physical brand. So I like that the fact where, say he's in a 3rd and short situation or in a situation by the goal line, he's going to get a lot of touches there, going to get a lot of production, as a result going to get a lot of touchdowns as well. That's how I see him profiling. He's a very physical back, and I really like him coming out of college, coming out of Florida State, I believe. I believe he had a fantastic year last year. So look out for Trey Benson. That being said, I don't think he's going to be drafted, maybe because more people may not know about him than a guy like Jaleel McLaughlin, but I do think that if he does go undrafted, be very aggressive in the waiver wire to pick him up, especially in the latter half of the season when a lot of people may let their guards down in who they're giving up. And if someone did roster him and he is on the waiver wire, pick him up immediately. And then some other guys. Obviously, some guys who I've always been their champion on the show, Zamir White and Tyjae Spears. Zamir White, I'm telling you, his whole situation has changed where this year he is the man in Las Vegas. Gone is Josh Jacobs. Gone is this overarching kind of feeling that everything is figured out in Las Vegas just because of Antonio Pierce. And so Zamir White immediately becomes the most appealing option for a lot of fantasy managers, especially as your backup running back or as a flex option. If you're in a super flex league, look for Zamir White as a flex option because he can be very valuable coming off the bench or even starting. He's a very interesting utility piece. And then Tyjae Spears as well. I think that with the addition of Tony Pollard, it complicates things a little bit more than I would have liked, but at the end of the day, I still think he has more upside, a higher floor than Tony Pollard, and with that also brings this level of understanding between him and Will Levis. I think that Will Levis would appreciate someone, especially in the screen game, if his comfortability throwing the ball down the field isn't really up to par early on in the season. I think that Tyjae Spears is a big threat in the receiving game in terms of those numbers for him. And then let's talk about a guy who I really like as well, Brian Robinson Jr. We talked about him a little bit, but outside of Brian Robinson Jr., because I think that while he is currently the lead back and obviously going to get a lot more attention because of that, he isn't necessarily someone I would be completely comfortable with, especially in situational moments. I'm liking DeAndre Swift because no matter where this man goes, whether it be as a Lion, an Eagle, a Bear, he will always be very productive. Now, I'm not certain as to why he's bouncing around so many different places, and that gives a lot of people pause because if you're not a running back who has stability in certain situations, you're not necessarily, someone who should be highly coveted, but DeAndre Swift is different because I remember, I believe it was his second season when Detroit was on Hard Knocks and a lot of people were expecting a lot out of him, and he really rose to the occasion then. And then for some reason he got picked up by the Eagles, had his career best year with the Philadelphia Eagles last year, now going to Chicago. And a lot of people might actually be skeptical of me being so high on DeAndre Swift, because of the Bears' outlook on offense, they look like they are going to be a very pass-heavy team, but with their three-headed monster at receiver and Caleb Williams. As Motrip V10 says, cheap viewers on Keen.gallery at 3QLY. I'm not sure what that means, but thank you for the comment. Nonetheless, Motrip V10. I think that the overarching sentiment by love for DeAndre Swift is that you need, as your running back two, someone who complements the best parts of a running back. If you do have someone like a Christian McCaffrey or a Breece Hall. If you have a Christian McCaffrey or Breece Hall, you have guys who, can get touchdown production from every level of the field. So for your second round pick, you might want someone like DeAndre Swift because he also, at any given moment, can have a breakout game. He may not always be appealing in terms of whether or not you are going to always find consistency with him, but he's a guy at the end of the day that really helps stabilize the running back position, and that's what a lot of people should be thinking about in terms of the running back position. I think that the most important aspect of it is finding that balance, because there's so many different strategies to utilize in terms of the running back position. Shout out to my sister Olivia Shepard donating. Thank you for the tip, Olivia. I appreciate you tuning in to today's show. But also, to close out this segment, if you do so choose any particular path that focuses on the running back, whether it be the hero running back or the zero running back, the sleepers that I've just mentioned are all guys who can supplement either strategy, the hero or the zero. For the hero, I like a guy like DeAndre Swift. For the zero, I like a guy like Jaleel McLaughlin just because of his receiving versatility, but it's all up to your interpretation. Let me know what you think in the comments about these guys, because I truly love all of them and I think they can add value if you are so thinking about them. But coming up for our last segment on today's show, we are going to be looking at some QB busts, some guys who I'm not as high on this year, some guys you ultimately should avoid. That will be the final segment of today's show after this short break.